Welcome to another episode of the Advice First podcast. This is your host, Robert Clark, kicking off with another amazing guest. Here today, I have Miss Selina Thomas. Welcome to the Advice First podcast. Selina, welcome to the Advice First podcast.
Thank you so much, Robert. I was so excited.
I was very excited. Not only are you the queen of publicity, I feel like you're constantly recording things, filming things. You do a great job pushing content on, everything from what we'll get into on business consulting to, I know you are passionate about Santa Clarita.
Absolutely.
And a lot of the things that we want to help small businesses with. So we'll get into that as well.
Awesome.
Before we get to that part, tell me a little bit about how you came into the world of HR consulting.
Sure. Well, I truly started my company, like many of our small businesses, very organically, right out of a Starbucks on Copper Hill and Seco. Wow. And I was a network queen. So, before I was a social media queen, I networked at VIA, at the Chamber, with small businesses and making sure that they were solid in their infrastructure with employees. And there's a real niche market for that, especially here. We are fertile soil, as I tell people, for small businesses. And it was really natural for me to continue that and build 6 Degrees. And so when I started, I literally would network, meet someone, and say, hey, meet me at Starbucks on Copper Hill. We'll talk more about it. Yeah. And then it would evolve. And then suddenly I was like, I need an office. I need to get bigger. And so 8 years later, I'm now trademarked nationally, have international clients. I just was in France earlier this year with a wine client. Darn, I had to go in the field.
Great client to keep.
And so, from Albright Painting to La Costina, Rolling Heating and Air, really staple companies in our community, family owned. There's a real nuance to that as well. I'm a family owned business myself. And so it just really became something that, separate from the passion I have for people, it serves people, it serves their businesses to have that infrastructure. And similar to the space that you guys operate in, you always want to be able to help people and help them protect what they built. Yes. And that's what I do.
You nailed it. And so did you have a background in HR?
So I have a master's in HR, and I am licensed nationally and now internationally. Yeah. And so it really was, I was grinding and I was driving past all these buildings. I'm like, somebody does their HR. There's too many companies out here that, it makes sense to outsource. So I started really in the medical space with our doctors, Dr. Mark Lucier and his practice and his team. They didn't have space or a need for a full-time HR lady, but they needed HR. Yeah. And so that's really how it happened in 6 Degrees. The premise is that we're all connected globally by 6 people. But in Santa Clarita, it's 2 to 3. It's really quick that we found out who we were connected to. And so
you're absolutely
no different.
Right.
Yeah.
So what do you love about human resources that you wanted to pursue a master's in the topic?
Well, we've all worked for bad companies. We've worked for companies that didn't have the infrastructure, and always it seemed that the employee got the short end. And that was unfortunate. And I had a few of those bad experiences myself. And I was, prior to that, a social worker. And so I always dealt with serving people. The social work side was a little too heavy for me, but I still wanted to serve people, and that was an easier kind of transition. So the company I actually worked for as a social worker said, hey, well, if we pay for your master's in HR, will you stay and give us another 3 years of service, and we'll call it, even. And that's exactly what happened, and that was in Bakersfield. And I then said, okay, well, at that time looking for a new community to live in, 75 miles away, I found Santa Clarita, and I raised my girls here and built a business, and here we are. So it went really fast.
So you started in Bakersfield?
Yes. When I was married, I lived in Bakersfield. Wow. And so, life happens, and, you guys deal with that in your practice. And I was divorcing, but I still wanted to be close enough yet far enough away. And I had to have a safe community. I had to have a community with great schools. My dad was retired superintendent, and he said, let me look at the schools. And I was like, okay, Dr. Thomas, check it out. And then he called me back. He's like, okay, Santa Clarita, it has great schools, coming from that mindset. And I was like, okay, Santa Clarita. He goes, Magic Mountain. I was like, okay, that's an easy sell for 3 young girls. Like, yes, we'll move to Magic Mountain. Yep. So that's what happened, and I raised them here.
Now we have 2 things in common.
Yeah.
We like to help people, and we both have a tie to Bakersfield. I'm a Cal State Bakersfield alum. And no one gets excited about that, except you. I think you're the first.
My ex-husband is in the Hall of Fame there. He is a national champion, a hammer thrower. And yeah, definitely. And I'm still very well connected to family there. He was the director for KGET.
Okay.
So my kids grew up, and you know that station well.
Wow.
So
yeah, very neat. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And so you said you really help small businesses, but I feel like that can sometimes be such a general term.
So broad, right? Yeah.
So how do you classify a small business that you're working with? You know, they're small, but not yet big enough to take on that full-time HR role.
And I have luckily had clients that have gotten to that sweet spot. So that small number in my mind in terms of being a really proficient practitioner is 150 is kind of your sweet spot that now you're, could still use me as an ancillary support to someone internal, but it's time to have that person that's really that internal person and I've vetted people and have people find that replacement for me, which is hard to do, but at the end of the day, I still have a relationship with that client. So 150 is kind of the cap. And during COVID, a lot of my clients that went from 33 to 300 because they were working in the e-commerce space and suddenly needed to be that essential company. And that's happened many times. And then in reverse, some said, hey, from COVID, we can work more efficiently and smaller, and we don't need an HR in-house, and we could still outsource with 6 degrees, and we saw her billboard, and we'll call her. So it happens in both ways, but I'm always here to serve. Even people that have internal HR call upon me, and that's to just have a neutral party, a third person. So I've provided services for people as big as Scorpion here in town.
Wow.
And I do their HR videos. And when you plug in and a new employee and you have an orientation, well, Selina comes up, and I've had people in the gas station go, you're the HR lady for my company. I see you on my videos. And so that's really great to be able to have an ability to still serve people that have something internal.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
You mentioned COVID, though. And,
yes.
And, I mean, what a time to be the human resources manager for one company. And here you are handling for multiple companies.
At least 100 in Santa Clarita.
What was that like?
It was truly, this is where I found a purpose to serve in a larger way than myself. And so I'm glad you asked that question. Because what happened was we didn't have a COVID handbook. None of us had a pandemic perspective to understand how to operate, who was essential, how was it that we come back, how do we phase 1, phase 2, the PPP. There were so many layers to the crisis that I just made myself essential. I wasn't on that list when it came out. I was like, wait, what? And I just said, you know what? I'm going to do I'm going to turn the video on. I'm going to, put my ring light on, and I'm going to share what I knew. And it served people. And I didn't know where it was landing until I started to get the calls and say, I thought about HR before, but now I need HR just to reopen, just to really help navigate what's happening. And that's really how it happened. It was really organic to how I transitioned into a larger calling to serve the community and not just businesses. And so that's what happened.
Yeah, that's so impactful.
Yeah.
I love that. How, you mentioned 150 employees being the upper end. How early do you start to work with a company?
Yeah, this is a great question. Some people have learned from crises or other cautionary tales, like I just got sued because I didn't do time and attendance correctly for breast and meal breaks. I heard that you're their HR. And so, or they heard in a networking scenario, this happened. And so they're always like, who's the source for that? And so I really kind of made myself the source within our community. And so it was really easy for people of late to go, call Selina, call 6 Degrees, and she'll help guide you, even if it's not something she can take on in whatever your crisis is. She's connected in a way that you'll get some answers, you'll get some support. And so I've come to accept new clients, but most of my clients come from other clients. I typically don't have to promote, but that's part of the brand now. You can't not promote.
The world's
every
best
day.
Promoter doesn't need to promote, but you still promote.
Yeah, I still promote because it's important. It is part of the brand. It has become, and I was doing daily messages, as I mentioned, and then people were like hungry for the messages. So then what's the message today? And so of late it's evolved into, the countdown for this candidacy, but prior it was always informative. It was always, here's the tip of the day. And you guys can do that in a quick soundbite also. And like these compliance issues come up like we had with Cal Savers last year. And that was really connection that we in your team had like a vested interest in making sure that our clients were doing that.
Absolutely. No, it's a great point. What, I'm curious, because there's talk of recession, in worldwide, industry-wide, but especially in our industry. And then you also have record low jobless claims. And so it just feels like we're in a weird spot right now.
Yeah.
And what are you seeing from the small business side as far as
trends,
hiring, retention trends, or people, losing employees and trying to shave some costs? What are you seeing out there?
The big trend right now, ironically, is that we have people that aren't wanting to come back to the workplace in person. We have a lot of people, and we have a lot of workforce issues for our small businesses that aren't really seen in the headlines like you saw with COVID, because they're resisting presenting that there's this crisis for small businesses that's still going on. Because we want to promote that things are great and we're leveling out and recovering. But recovery also means stability for a company, and the stability is always in the workforce. And so we have people that are adamant that they want to work remotely. They're adamant that they can ask more of the employer than they did before because there's such a shortage of people coming back. So employers are kind of making that adjustment there and creating better opportunities, being more desirable as a company, being more competitive. And so that levels up who gets the scarce workforce that's out there. And so that's really the trend right now. And, you can kind of predict based on what's happening with some of the numbers with COVID, but you can also predict how workforce issues really either mitigate or escalate risk for employers. Yeah. So I'm always mindful of that. Like, okay, you just hired a group of people. They're not used to your culture. Let's get some training. Let's do sexual harassment, hostile work environment. Let's start setting the tone for what the training and culture looks like in the company, because we're all kind of coming back together and it's time. Right. You're doing this annually as best practice. You got a new group of people. Let's do it. So just being a strategic partner in that way is important.
Yeah. Do you see a lot of your clients seeking to hire employees right now?
Absolutely. And they're also making the offers a little sweeter. And obviously, even in a compromise, like we'll have a hybrid schedule. Just come in 3 days a week.
Wow.
And so that's really been, of late, some of the structures to some of the offers is like 3 days, 2 days, and then the absolutes like trainings. And those were things I never did before as a practitioner. Yeah. I'm having to be creative in my own processes to help make an offer a little more sound for someone in comparison to maybe another employer.
Right.
And, we're all kind of competing for that workforce here.
Absolutely. It has to be such a virtue working with multiple clients as opposed to being human resource for just one company.
Or one industry, yes. I have a range of industries.
Right. And, if I were HR for one company out here and we weren't getting resumes or applications in, you start to think, is it our offer? Is it our company?
Is it our culture?
Is it the industry? But you see it across the way like, hey, this is what's happening over here. I'm starting to see this trend. Why don't we make this adjustment?
Even with some of the things that they're doing internally, like diversity, equity, inclusion, people are coming in and they're looking at the landscape of, do they feel included? Do they see someone that they feel they can connect to? And does the culture exude that when they come in? And so there's that real kind of absolute that people, separate from sexual harassment, hostile work environment, they also want to see that you have an initiative in that regard as well. And they can do that now because they know their value. Yep. And so when employers are partnered with someone like me that's not just doing the compliance piece, they're doing the strategic piece, they're a little more advantaged.
Yeah, big time. And how important are employee benefits?
An absolute. They're measuring your offer against other offers, and they're leaving and we're countering. I've seen that a lot as well lately. like, well, I got this offer from da-da-da, and so what do you want to do? And so that's been a trend as well. People that are existing are being headhunted by people, and so that's been kind of like this process where people are almost devouring workforce that's not even put themselves out there. They're like, hey, we saw you on such and such. We would love to see if you would consider our company. That's happening.
And for what roles? Is it more?
It runs the gambit.
Everything.
Really. I have a lot of people that have learned to develop a social media side, and so those are of late. And, we talked about the social media piece that I do, and I'm a one-man band, but they actually have departments for people that this is what is driving their revenue and driving their visibility and driving the brand. And so they have people that are literally dedicated just to that.
Wow.
So that's one trend that I've seen that people have added to their bottom line. Is like, this is a line item that we need to be investing in.
Mm-hmm. And
you guys do a great job of it too, because like someone that is always out there, and our algorithms are like this.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, it's so important in today's day and age. Mm-hmm. And even if you're not trying to drive new revenue, just the branding
of your company and your culture is in that. And so this is what lands that caliber candidate. Mm-hmm. And so the first thing some of my candidates look at is like, do you have social media? Mm-hmm. And they'll scroll back as they should. What initiatives are you involved in the community? People now know that they can be a little more selective, and they want to be tied to not just the brand that's doing well, but the company that's giving back. And so I have a lot of companies that is a real essence of their culture as well. It's a core value.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Do you find yourself ever coaching them on social media because you're so good at it?
Well, it's so funny. We all kind of draw from each other, and we learn from each other. And so I have a client that's always, really doing, and all white painting is really great at it. And I kind of learned from, their internal processes, and it became kind of an essential part of my day, and I became kind of habitual about it. And then, so we're always like, it seems like we're always posting on the same. I'm like, I see you, and I see you. So I've learned from many of my clients, but I don't coach them as much as they tell me that I modeled something that they ended up, using, and it's working. And I think for everybody, knowing that that's kind of the new direction. Being shuttered for so long, that was really our only window. That's really our only window out. And so people really gleaned a lot from you in that crisis from your social media and then subsequent after. And so everything I do is always very positive. It's always informative. And of course, I have my inevitable bloopers. And some people just ask for those. Like, could you just send that? Because I needed a day. And they happen. And, I enjoy posting those as well.
Yep.
So it gives you some insight about me. And don't take myself too serious. And I definitely am not a pro at this, but I do my best.
I love that.
Yeah.
Social media was very big, especially as it became our primary means of, social relationships
connection
for the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
How much time do you spend consuming social media?
Not much. And it's so funny, as much as you see me on it, I don't have the bandwidth to consume it in the same way. So people will say, did you see such and such? I'm like, no, can you send it to me? Because I am, truly what you're seeing is me grinding and moving. And so I don't have much time to consume it, because I do know that if I do, I'll go into a wormhole and I won't get out. Yeah. And so I have to be disciplined about it, just like everything else.
Right.
And so I appreciate that people will consume mine, but I definitely can't say I do the same in terms of anything that's not positive or informative. And so if I do watch it, it's going to be similar to, what I'm trying to accomplish. And, the culture of our social media is really equally yoked in that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You have to fuel your mind with good things, just like you fuel your body.
Yeah.
I love that. Mm-hmm. How do you, with so many roles now going remote and employees saying, hey, I prefer to work remote, I completely agree. There's strong arguments that it is more efficient.
Yes.
But how does an employer, especially who's not used to that,
adjust.
employee relationship,
mm-hmm.
how do they trust that person's not sitting on their phone, for multiple hours a day?
And that's where the infrastructure of Selina Thomas 6 Degrees comes in, and that accountability. And so we have to build it into our processes. And so we do actually have handbooks for people that are remote workers versus people that have hybrid versus people that are completely in person, or a combination of all three. And so that accountability to the results is always going to be part of how we know that they're not just in a wormhole on YouTube, is because there's got to be results. And so typically I like to start with kind of a pilot opportunity, and then they have, metrics that are met. And by that 30-day, we know that, not only the learning curve has happened, but that they are actually doing the work. And it's not always suited for every role. I mean, I have a lot of contractors that there's no hybrid role for somebody that's painting. You either can be there or you can't. But for other roles, operationally, I think that efficiency serves everybody. And we did learn a lot. And so we can apply that and still have accountability. And people have been actually more efficient. And I found this to be true with a lot of the agreements that we've had, that they've more than met the metrics. They're actually happier employees. And so we've adjusted and learned kind of a new, I hate the new normal word, but it is what it is. It is kind of the new normal of the way people are operating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Crisis comes again, we know that we have a means to keep moving.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
You mentioned metrics that you'll want to pay attention to.
Yeah.
What are some of those metrics that employers can justify whether an individual is making the cut or performing?
So it depends on the position, but definitely the first one is time and attendance. So we have a way to obviously measure that they've clocked in, they're seated. We have people that are in some spaces, actually they have to log in and you can actually see them. And so it's almost as if they're here, but they're truly virtual. So we know that. We know the time and attendance there. And some of those things even include down to the finite detail of you're dressed, your camera's on, and as if you were to be face-to-face with someone, we would expect a professional attire. And then, of course, the results could be, from the calls made to contracts being fulfilled, whatever the role is. And I think administratively, it's always easier to figure out if somebody's getting something done. It either is done or it isn't, and you'll know that. And then, of course, timelines and deadlines always help people, kind of place things in like real time. Like this really happened because the deadline was met, it's completed, and we move on to the next. Not every role can do that, but you do have sales that can really be driven in that way.
Yeah. Is that something that you helped employers measure before the pandemic, or are these all pivots
really
you've had to build in?
They really have been built in. And it was sometimes a way to make the argument that we're essential. And we can do it in this way. And so that was also a guide for outcomes to go, okay, we can justify this because the outcomes yielded that we can. And it really is the person. Like I told people in this process, here's where you get to make it your own, right? No one's ever done this before, so show us what it looks like. And then, of course, you have situations where someone shows you, like I tell my kids this all the time, here was your mistake. You showed me that you could do it, and you can do it well. So now I have the expectation. And that's the same with employees. You showed me you made it your own, and now you've set the bar for me to use as a guide for anyone else coming in. And that's kind of like how we develop. And so when someone makes something their own, because we've never done it before, there's real opportunity. And that's really, for us, like a highlight as a company. Like this never happened before. Now we have this person, and that's like truly the new way we're going to do it. That's a dedicated person in that position.
So key. And so you are running for city council for Santa Clarita Valley.
I am.
And
so exciting.
Tell me why you wanted to take that on.
Sure. Well, truly the antithesis of it was the crisis with COVID. During the crisis, as I mentioned, I was getting on camera every day sharing, and I had business owners say, we need your voice at city council. It's going to be a long recovery. And being small, we knew our recovery was going to be longer than the big boys. And if we didn't have a voice, it could be even longer than that. And so that's really how it happened. I had owners that said, your business acumen and your compassion for what we're going through right now is needed. And, there are other issues that came forward that made sense. My kids are older now. I have 2 in college. 1 is a junior in high school. So that in and of itself, and I'm that mom, like the travel ball mom, softball, volleyball, everywhere mom. And so they're like, hey, you should set some goals, Mom. We're doing our thing. And so that was, where they were really made a difference. And then I think the community is looking for a new, fresh voice. I was a voice that was part of the crisis, so they're looking for that voice in the recovery. They know that I had results in that, and they know that I led in that. Without, when someone makes themselves essential, that's leadership. And I think that all kind of combined with, we're looking at a new community. Even in the last 4 years since the incumbents last ran, our diversity has changed completely. We went from 70% community to 50% minority community now. Wow. We're at 50%. A lot of people don't realize that, because during that shift, not just the COVID crisis, but there was a big population boom and change here. And so I think people are looking for representation that looks like the community. And I've been here for 12 years. I certainly can say I'm a stakeholder. I've raised kids here. I've built a business helping businesses. I'm a stakeholder. I'm a homeowner. And so all the issues that constituents have, I am a constituent first, and I embody what's possible. And I think people look to that when in their leadership.
Yeah.
There's credibility with that.
What you alluded to a few pieces of it, but I'd be curious to hear your scope.
Sure.
What influence do you hope to make once you are a part of City Council?
Yeah, so I am the only no party preference candidate in this race. So that impact alone, to say that there's a person that's dedicated to the people and not the party affiliations, I think was important. It's a nonpartisan seat, so we have to act in a nonpartisan way, bipartisan in our decision making. It has to be for the people, but really amplifying that in being a no party preference speaks volumes, I think. And